Alright, so the goal of contraception is to stop pregnancy, which means that in order to understand contraception, we're going to need to mention a couple of things about how pregnancy works so that we can fully understand how contraception works too. It will be good to know a bit of the basic functions that hormones play in this process. Remember that estrogen promotes the thickening of the endometrial wall, and progesterone maintains the lining for the time when a fertilized egg is ready for implantation. Alright, so let's start by discussing what I like to call the pathway of pregnancy. Basically how an oocyte or egg becomes fertilized. And until you're more familiar with the pathway, you can use 7 suing vacuums as a mnemonic. It'll make sense as we go through. The pathway begins within the seminiferous tubules of the testes where the spermatogonia undergo meiosis to form sperm. Sperm then travel from the testes through the efferent ductules into the epididymis where sperm mature. Then, during ejaculation's peristaltic muscle contractions within the vas deferens pulse the sperm toward the prostate where the sperm mix with fluid from the seminal vesicles. At this point, the mixture is called semen. Semen is passed through the prostate gland via the ejaculatory duct into the urethra and out the end of the penis. At this point, the semen enter the vagina and pass through the external os of the cervix, travel up the uterus through the uterine tubes or the oviducts to hopefully find an ovulated egg to fertilize and form a zygote. Alright, so that's the pathway of pregnancy. Now that we have that covered, we can look at mechanisms of contraception. The end goal of contraception is to stop fertilization, and we can stop fertilization by affecting different structures along the pathway we just discussed. Now, sperm travel up through the vas deferens. Here is a spot for potential prevention. A vasectomy is a procedure that cuts the vas deferens. This stops sperm from entering the ejaculatory duct. The testes still produce sperm, but the sperm are simply broken down by macrophages, and in fact the body recognizes sperm like a bacteria and produces anti-sperm antibodies so that the immune system can break them down. So continuing along the pathway, sperm travel to the ejaculatory duct and out the urethra. At this point, sperm transfer from the male to the female reproductive tracts. Here, physical barriers, which are also commonly known barriers such as condoms or diaphragms, can also be utilized to stop the transfer. These block the sperm from entering the uterus and finding and fertilizing the oocyte. Another form of contraception is an IUD. Once inside the uterus, sperm disperse to find the oocyte. The uterus may be equipped with an intrauterine device, which is the IUD. Typically, these can be hormonal, which we'll discuss shortly, or they can be made of copper. Raised concentrations of copper within the uterus can demobilize the sperm and can also increase the female immune response for white blood cells to come and phagocytose the sperm. Alright, the last method of contraception we'll discuss may seem a bit less direct than the previous ones we've just seen. This form of contraception alters the role that hormones play on the female reproductive system. Administration of the hormones ranges from IUDs and patches to pills. These devices release either a combination of progesterone and estrogen, or they release progesterone alone. Now recall from the menstrual cycle that concentration levels of these hormones affect other hormones released from the anterior pituitary gland. Now take a look at these diagrams. One shows how hormone levels change during the menstrual cycle, and the other shows the changes during pregnancy. Notice the differences and similarities of the hormone levels between the diagrams. The level of hormones during pregnancy is similar to the hormone levels during ovulation. In both cases, this rise in progesterone and estrogen that is seen in both situations signals to the rest of the body that there is either a zygote or an oocyte that needs to be taken care of. Because of this, these hormones inhibit LH and FSH from producing another egg through ovulation, because the space, or uterus, is already occupied. In essence, the hormonal contraceptives can trick the body into believing that the space is already occupied, and so even if sperm successfully travel through the entire reproductive tract, there's not going to be any egg to find. Now we hope this overview has served as a study tool for learning reproductive anatomy and how contraceptive techniques take advantage of that anatomy along the pathway of pregnancy.